A recent survey by Lifeway Research Institute demonstrated that in 6 months prior to the survey, 20% of the respondents shared their faith with a non-believer, whereas 80% were unable to share their faith even a single time. Why is that the case? Why are Christians so hesitant to share their faith? What can we do to help Christians feel more comfortable introducing non-believers to the gospel? Thankfully, I'm joined today by Dr. Bernard Palmer, a retired senior surgeon from the UK, one of the founding pastors of Christchurch in Baldock, England, and also someone who is a practiced and skilled evangelist to help us with this question. Bernard, first of all, why do you think it is that people are so hesitant to share their faith? Because in this same survey, the researchers found that somewhere between 80 to 90% of people that regularly attend church feel that evangelism is important. They're just not doing it.
I think one of the big problems is people don't really understand why they've been called to be Christians. The Bible's very clear that when we become Christians, God has called us, and He's called us for a purpose, to represent Him, which is both by lifestyle and integrity of lifestyle and by what we say. And people are apprehensive about doing this, one, because they're not clear, but also because they're worried about the consequences. They might lose friends, they might have problems at work, and perhaps they don't know how to do it well. I think that survey shows that we've got a real need to train people, both in the urgency of sharing the gospel, how to do it, and to get people praying that God will open doors for them. Because it is fascinating that when people pray, they get opportunities. I would bet that 80 to 90% weren't praying.
Yeah. Now, you've developed a metaphor that I think is very helpful as a guide for how to maybe approach a non-believer and help them to realize their need for Jesus, but also how the Christian faith is true. And so could you explain that metaphor to us and then help unpack it a little bit?
Yeah, this came out of, I was asked to give a talk to a group of atheists, and I wanted to condense down why they should be Christians. That's the subject. And I came up with this idea of a river with two banks. One bank represents the world that we live in, which is a bit selfish. Everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, as long as they don't get into trouble because of it, with a superficial veneer of niceness. But it's our world with a lot of naughty things going on. The other bank is the ideal world. It's God's world, where everyone's working together for a common good. They're all living under the authority of a Lord who they love and who's ideal. Now, when you look at these two possible scenarios, people in our world say, yeah, this looks lovely, but frankly, it's idealistic. It's not real. It's a giant leap of faith to get into that world. We're stuck where we are. But if you look closely across this river, there are lots of stepping stones, arguments as to why this is actually the world God wants us to be in. And these stepping stones can be subdivided into 4 groups. The first group I call sort of philosophy, but that's a bit high-powered. It's what happens if we have a world where there is no God? What are the consequences of there being no God in this world? The second group is the evidence from science that there has to be a creator. We can't have happened by mistake. And that's very powerful arguments. The third group is the historical arguments, particularly about Jesus. Did he exist? Was he prophesied in the Old Testament? Did he die? Did he rise from the dead? That's great data you can get into. And then the last group of stepping stones is what I call the instincts, that all of us have this feeling in us that life has a purpose, that honesty matters, that there is a thing called truth. And integrity is something that's terribly important. So when you put these whole things together, it's a lovely scenario that explains to people that the Christian faith is very reasonable.
And so really then this becomes a great way for Christians to think about how they would approach a non-believer, that they need to equip themselves to be able to articulate some of the reasons why it's rational to move from one bank of the river to the other bank of the river.
Absolutely. And to help people to do this, I'm interested if you read in Acts 18, where Paul, when he went to Achaia, which is around Corinth, he debated, he argued with people. And later in the chapter, Apollos does the same. There is really good evidence why we should live under the authority of Jesus Christ.